Broadcasting from the world headquarters of the National Floor Safety Institute is America's slip and fall guy, Russ Kenzie.
This is America's slip and fall guy, Russ Kenzior. Thanks for listening to my podcast. Oftentimes, when somebody slips and falls, they tend to blame the floor as the cause of their injury. In fact, 50 to 55% of all slip and fall injuries are alleged to take place as a result of a unsafe floor or walkway. And so it all starts with the floor. It all starts at ground level. Joining us this morning is Mr. Marc Adelman, who's a principal with the firm of Perkins Eastman Architects. In fact, he's the co-managing principal of the Chicago office. And we're going to talk a little bit about slips, trips, and falls as seen through the eyes of an architect. So with that, welcome to the program today, Marc.
Thank you.
First question I have is, and probably many have, is what are the what's the role or the view of slips, trips, and falls from that of an architect? I mean, how does the architectural industry view this problem, or is it a problem?
It is a problem, and the role of the architect actually is the practice of architecture is basically to protect the public's health and safety and welfare, and that's why we get licensed, and we're responsible for specifying materials that can protect the health and welfare and safety of the community. But the challenge is that we are relying on a lot of data that may not necessarily be correct. We're working with salespeople that are basically telling us information, and it's our responsibility to really dig in and validate the information that we're getting.
When you say salespeople, you mean floor covering salespeople or specifiers?
Floor covering salespeople.
Gotcha. So they come into your firm, they meet with yourself or designers. You have a team of people that I would assume kind of go through the selection process, and they select products based on color, style, of course, pricing, and ultimately safety. But tell us a little bit about how that process works. I mean, what's the chain of command here? Who's looking out for safety in that purchasing pyramid?
Well, when we're looking at flooring, it's really looking at a variety of criteria. Part of it is aesthetics, the color, the pattern, and another part is the performance and the durability, and the appropriateness for that particular space. But another important part is slip resistance, especially in some of our practice segments, which include senior living and hospitality and large public buildings. Those become very critical. The whole slip resistance portion of it. So it's really up to the designer and the project architect to kind of take a look at the materials and then get whatever information is necessary, test results to confirm that it does meet with, the slip resistant requirements for that particular application.
So ultimately, there's some industry standard for slip resistance that your industry relies upon, and that's what you expect from suppliers of floors. Is that correct?
There is not an industry standard. That's what the challenge is.
Okay.
The challenge is that depending on who we're talking to, we're getting information on a variety of different tests. Some manufacturers use the ANSI A137.1, which is known as the AccuTest, which is primarily a quality control test, and it's not necessarily meant to test all floor surfaces. It's more of the ceramic tile industry, and that's the one they constantly bring forward. And I've also seen results from an obsolete test, which is the ASTM C1028, which that seems to show up on occasion as well. And it's surprising that when these reps come into our office and I question them on these various tests, they really don't seem to have a clue. And in some cases, they tell me that the ANSI A137.1 is in the building code, which it is not. And I point that out to them, but that's what they've been told. And a lot of our designers listen to that. They're looking for that information. So my preference is I usually ask if it can be tested in accordance with the B101.3. And I even write that into our specifications. And before we specify it, I ask the manufacturer if they can actually do that test. And if not, then we either look for an alternate or we have the test done ourselves just to make sure that it is meeting the slip resistance requirements.
Well, how reluctant are manufacturers, to provide test data? And you mentioned the ceramic tile industry. Obviously, there's a lot of other types of floors other than ceramic tile, resilient, wood, laminate, polished concrete. I mean, there's such a wide range of choices. How do all the other manufacturers, suppliers of floors provide information to you on this subject of safety, or do they?
Many times they don't. Other times they just pass on these other test results, which is why in many cases we have to take control of the situation. And like I mentioned, in all of the hard surface flooring specification sections, I write in that the product needs to be tested in accordance with, the B101.3 and once it's installed, it needs to be tested. So
you're asking for or requiring some form of affirmation or confirmation that what's actually been installed again complies. Do you have any requirement? I know the ANSI B101.3 wet dynamic coefficient of friction standard has 3 traction ranges: high traction, moderate traction, low traction. Is that what you're looking for to find out what traction range it falls into?
Yeah, usually hazardous locations, wet areas near doorways, ramps, that sort of thing. We're looking for high traction.
Have the manufacturers complied with your request? I mean, do they provide you test data in compliance with the ANSI B101.3 standard when requested?
Some have, but having it written into the specifications, it puts it on the general contractor or the subcontractor to provide the tests.
And I assume they do that?
They have. I've referred them to where they can get the test done. Many of them don't have a clue who can do the test for them.
And you wonder why we have such a slip and fall problem. I mean, it's not unusual for industries, including yours. You're not, trained to be experts in standards and slip resistance and coefficient of friction. It is troubling, however, to hear, and you're not the first person to say this to me, that manufacturers of ceramic tile do promote the misinformation that there's a requirement in the building code to comply with the ANSI A137.1, or what they now call the ANSI 326.3 standard, when in fact there is no such requirement. But again, you and your team, and by the way, how many people in your office? Give me kind of a scale of how big is Perkins Eastman.
The Chicago office has 44 staff, combination of architects and interior designers. The firm itself has 17 offices, 4 of them international, and with over 1,000 staff. So
wow. And what kind of projects do you guys see yourself taking on?
The practice areas we have are senior living, hospitality interiors, corporate or workplace projects, large scale master plan developments, healthcare, and K through 12.
Wow. All of which have a sizable slip and fall hazards.
Absolutely. So, yes.
Especially the elderly, the healthcare.
Yes.
Healthcare. So as you and your team of architects, designers, specifiers across the country attempt to address this problem, Mark, how do you do it? I mean, how do you actually start the process, ensure that you're putting in the right floor, it's the appropriate level of slip resistance for the given application, and at the end of the day, it's what the client wanted and needed, and ultimately, I guess, are capable of maintaining the floor in that current state of safety. I know aesthetics are a big deal, but we live in a world of litigation, And I know that even touches your industry, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes.
architects are
Yeah,
faced.
actually, I think the majority of the cases against my profession have to do with slip falls.
Really? Wow. That's probably a bit surprising to hear that
It's
that even
either
affects
it's
your
either
industry.
it's either water penetration or slip falls. So, the building exterior not being watertight. So
And maybe one led to the other, huh? The
could be.
leaking roof
Yeah.
led to the slip and fall. But your clients ultimately have to face the litigation issue along with the insurance industry, kind of on their own, and oftentimes it comes all the way full circle where lawyers sue everybody. We'll sort it out at trial. But nonetheless, it's such a sizable problem, and I know manufacturers of floors tend to shy away from answering questions, oftentimes, and I'm going to defend them a little bit because they don't want to be dragged in, Mark, to your lawsuit. They don't want to. They don't want to be part of the litigation, feeding frenzy. So they kind of stand on the sidelines. But that's the very, problem is they're on the sidelines. They don't really want to engage safety. And you brought up a good point. The ANSI A137.1 and the ANSI A326.3 standards are promulgated by a trade association, the Ceramic Tile Industries Trade Association, known as the Tile Council of North America. So you actually have a trade association, self-proclaimed lobbyist for the ceramic tile industry, writing standards for ceramic tile, none of which have anything to do with safety. So when they speak of slip resistance, it's not in the context of safety, but rather, as you noted, quality control. And so that draws a lot of confusion. Now, how do you go about training your team, your staff, the designers, specifiers? How do they know what to look for, what questions to ask of a manufacturer?
Well, internally we have a lot of kind of ongoing training sessions, and one of those sessions is a project manager, project architect boot camp, and it's typically once or twice a month, and it's over the lunch hour. And I've actually presented to that 3 times, basically gone through the standards, the requirements, what some of the challenges are, and at one point I do want to get a one of the testing devices to physically demonstrate how the floors are tested, and it's gotten a lot of interest. In fact, we had one of our designers was invited to go to a tile manufacturing plant, and during one of the presentations, the presenter actually indicated that the AccuTest was in the building code, and on, and she challenged him on this, and she told me about the story. So
Wow.
and
Well,
he asked her, "Who are you and where are you from?"
yeah,
And
and
so
we won't invite you next time.
yeah, that's right.
Well, again, it's everyone's got they want to protect themselves, their industry, their clients. I understand. I guess we all understand that. But at the end of the day, it's people's lives, it's people's safety. You're working on elder cares. That's somebody's mom and dad, whose
Yes.
health is at risk here. So you do take it personally. Certainly, we do. In fact, this September, you're going to be a speaker at the National Safety Council's Congress in San Diego. I think it's on Monday, September the 9th. I'll be there as well. And this is a roundtable discussion that you'll be contributing to. There will be a medical doctor, Dr. Howard Harris, and an attorney from the state of California, kind of openly discussing this problem. They all kind of sort of relate to each other, regardless of industry. But you're going to be one of the speakers at that program, so I'm going to give you a little plug here.
Thank you.
For that coming up. And but at the end of the day, everyone's got a different view, and your view as an architect of this problem is unique. And I know you and I've known each other for years. And have you seen any progress, Mark, being made in the industry? Is there improvement? Have the standards just been more confusing over time, or where's this all headed?
I really have not seen. It does seem as if there are more of the flooring manufacturers. The reps are aware of the test, they just choose to use the other test. That's what their corporate standards are, and are aware of the B101.3, but they choose to use the IQ test.
Now, that's
And I've
primarily
explained to them from my perspective. I've actually, as you know, I went through the walkway auditor training session, and in that we had to, we experimented with both the tests, and my experience was that with the little button on top of the traction device, you can choose which test you wanted to do, and the floor surface was prepared exactly the same way for each one. And when I pushed the button for the AccuTest, I got a higher rating than, and that seemed consistently getting a higher rating. So I'm not sure. And that was without, using the, their procedures for, the extra wetting solution and that sort of thing. This was just with the kind of the standards for the B101.3. So making the floor, or less wetting solution, reducing that would have probably given me another arbitrarily high reading on the floor. So that's why I have such a distrust for that test, is because it seems to be designed to actually give you a higher reading. And I suspect, and Russ, you and I talked about it, is that in the protocol for the test, they include, the first reading, which is misleading because you've got stiction, which is where the shoe is actually molded to the floor. So you're going to get an arbitrarily high reading at that point, and they average that in, whereas the B101.3 throws that reading out, which is the right way to do it. So that's why I explain that to our staff here, and I've even explained that to some of the reps, some of the reasonings behind why those readings, we can't trust them. So.
Well, yeah, sadly, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that the TCNA A137.1 and A326.3 standards call for one specific test device, the BOT 3000E. And I think that's the device you were referring to that you
Yes.
And that device, regardless of the surface, when you select the different test methods, does, and in our experience as well, produce significantly higher levels of coefficient of friction. Even though the surface is identical, the conditions are the same. It seems to be almost as if it's programmed to give higher readings, as to suggest that the tile floor is safer than it may actually be. There, of course, is a lot of confusion, and has been for years, about which testing device or tribometer is the best to use. NFSI, of course, has a tribometer selection process, which is a rigorous a standard that really provides manufacturers of these devices the ability to prove their dependability, reliability, accuracy, and what's known as precision and bias. Although there are several devices that are NFSI approved, sadly, as we are sitting here today, the BOT 3000E is not an NFSI approved device. So it's really uncertain as to its degree of performance, accuracy, reliability, et cetera. We just simply don't know. But as an architect, you need to know. I mean, it's an important element of your job, because at the end of the day, you are licensed, and you're going to be held responsible, especially if you're, sadly, God forbid, if you are dragged into court. But with that, we appreciate your help today, and the frank and honest conversation on the subject of slips, trips, and falls. If anybody needs to get a hold of you, Mark, how can they reach you?
They can reach me at m.adelman, Adelman, at perkinseastman.com.
All righty. Well, thanks again for your help and helping to clarify what oftentimes is a confusing subject. And so thanks again, Mark. We really appreciate it, and hope to talk to you soon one day.
Okay. Thanks, Russ.
You're welcome. Well, this has been America's Slip and Fall Guy, Russ Kensior, and until we meet next time, stay safe. Thanks again.